welcome. As he said, I do have 7 children with 3 on the autism spectrum. And 15 years ago, my twins were diagnosed with autism. There you go. There are Max and Anna. Max was not learning from therapy. He was in therapy for months and months and still didn't have one word receptively. So I developed a filming method, which we call discrete video modeling, or DVM. And with that, he was able to catch up to his peers in language by the time he was 7 years old. The first day he saw these videos, he said his first word. By the time he was 14 years old, he caught up to the gifted meme. So you can see here, this is Max's language before we started DVM, the purple line. The red line is average, and the blue line is gifted. Here's where we started the videos, and he caught up right about here at 7 years old, and then went on to cross gifted. We decided that we wanted to deliver this message to the entire world, but before we went public with it, we had to complete our research. We had a pilot study done in Spokane, Washington with Gonzaga University's teaching classroom. 8 children had autism, 6 had low verbal skills, 2 were nonverbal despite intensive therapy for 3 years. We started the trial in September, and by January, the 2 nonverbal children were speaking in complete sentences. So we knew we had something that could be generalized to the population. After that, we wanted to know how best to use it in the classroom, because experts were telling us that if we don't use it correctly, we may get false negatives. So with Gonzaga University, again with an IRB from that university, we had a trial with, this time, 5 different classrooms with 3 teachers and 3 different teaching styles. And yes, we found that if Gemini is used correctly, you get these fantastic gains. But if it's not, you get minimal gains. So there's a 4-fold increase in gains depending on how you use the program. Gemini is fantastic. It's amazing, but it's not a magic pill. You have to use it correctly or it doesn't really work that well. I think this slide is one of the most encouraging pieces of information to come out of that study. This is dividing the students into 3 different language ability levels. So you have the first one here, were nonverbal children. And in the 3 weeks of the study, they did make gains, which is exciting. This middle group are children that we labeled minimally verbal. Means that they had single word labels and they could follow single step instructions. The last group, where do we go? The last group had low verbal skills, and they were just about to mainstream, and they were leaving special education. So the difference between the middle group and the end group in their language abilities was vast. But look, they both learned at the same rate with Gemini, which gives us a lot of hope that minimally verbal children could very quickly catch up to their peers and be mainstreamed. This next table shows us the power of Gemini with academic skills. We chose 12 students who were being taught colors or numbers for the entire 9 months of school year with not a lot of success. As you can see in the pretest, they got almost nothing right. After just 5 days of viewing, they got between 60 to 80% correct. Now, do I believe that Gemini was able to teach these children in just 5 days what these very dedicated and able teachers couldn't in 9 months? No, not exactly. I believe all that work was being stored in those children's brain, and they just needed Gemini to fill in the missing gap for mastery. This is a video of this study, of the children in the study. All of the children in this video have autism. And 3 weeks ago, they looked like typical children with autism. They were sitting in their stairs, had sort of a far-off daydream look on their face. They were very stoic and looking straight ahead. This is after 3 weeks of using Gemini.
Elephant. 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 Lizard. Bear. 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 The most important thing that you notice about this video is the joint attention.
These children did not have it 3 weeks ago. We're seeing increase in eye contact, social skills, not only joint attention, interaction with playmates, all sorts of skills emerge.
And listen.
The next we wanted to find out, is Gemini that unique, or is it just putting any standard video modeling in a classroom that creates this kind of results? So Dr. Maria Gilmore and Portland State University did a study in Inglewood School District in California, this time from preschool all the way through middle school. And they compared standard video modeling to Gemini in the classroom. And yes, what we saw, that there was almost a 900% increase in the acquisition of expressive language using Gemini versus standard video modeling. Recent research has been published by a collaboration with Princeton University, University of Toledo, and University of Kentucky, which shows that adults on the spectrum can learn language, reading, and articulation. This is a landmark study because 90% of most research is done with little kids, and 99% of apps are for 6 years old and younger. With our aging population, if they cannot develop a rich vocabulary and be proficient readers, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Not only are most studies done with little kids, but they are also done in clinics under artificial and sort of controlled conditions. And these gains almost never generalize into the chaos of the classroom. In fact, academics tell me that they're frustrated with teachers because they don't implement their strategies. Well, they're too complicated to introduce into the classroom when you have so many things going on. I love this table because it asks the teachers in the study, again, this study was done in the school, not in a clinic. It asked them how they felt about video modeling. The only intervention was used with Gemini. Students' participation in video modeling was problematic, either disagree or strongly disagree. Students' participation in video modeling was beneficial, either agree or strongly agree. I would be willing to implement video modeling in the future, agree or strongly agree. We've got something that's going to work functionally. Unlike other therapies, there doesn't seem to be an age limit with Gemini. This young man's mother contacted me about 3 months ago, and she said she heard her son's adult voice for the first time in his life because of Gemini. He had made no sounds even since he was 2 years old. So the first word he ever said, she hears a man's voice coming out of his lips. We are using Gemini with people in their 60s who are stroke victims, who the doctor said would never be able to talk. Not only that they had no more cognitive level. They couldn't even understand what was going on. We're proving them wrong. These people are now being able to speak in sentences after using Gemini for a few months. People in their 80s with Alzheimer's are learning to remember everything they see with the Gemini videos, and they're forgetting everything else. So clearly, there is a significant neurological change happening. We're seeing gains in social, emotional, language, articulation, academic skills, fine motor, and even gross motor skills. So how are we doing this? Well, there's a lot of speculation with neurologists on how Gemini is able to affect this sort of change. There's probably a combination of many factors. First of all, everything that you see and hear in this room right now, your brains are all taking in. So it's not just my voice. You're listening to your neighbor, you're hearing a fan, the flicker of the lights, everything. But your brain, as neurotypical people, is paring down the information that's not the most important. People with autism don't have that ability to pare down unimportant information. In fact, it shows in research that their brains are larger than a typical person, which means they're very capable of learning a great deal, but far less capable of using that information. The way the DVM method is developed and is delivered, we pare down all of the information that's unnecessary for the student. And it appears that we are training their brains to do the same. We've seen in research that once children watch the Gemini videos, they are able to significantly learn more from their environment afterwards. We also believe that Gemini is increasing the overlap between the auditory and visual planes. This is responsible for the McGurk effect. This is a video here from the BBC. I'm not going to play the video, but if you take two screens, just like you see, one person on one side, one video is saying ba, ba, ba. The other side is saying fa, fa. They're not saying it though, you just see their lips move. Even though the audio will only play ba, if you glance back and forth on the screen, you will hear it change from ba to fa. It doesn't even matter if you know that it's only saying ba, you can't help it. You actually hear with your eyes, except if you have severe dyslexia. Then you only hear ba no matter what you see. We have a rather dramatic example of how Gemini is affecting this in this one teenager in Santa Monica. She has the most severe dyslexia that I've ever seen. She's 13 years old. Her parents had spent close to $1 million trying to teach her how to read. Even so, she had a preschool level of reading. This is what her mother writes. My daughter had many MRIs, fMRIs, intensive remedial reading instruction, and more. The top experts at UCLA told us she would never be able to read due to the structure of her brain and no semantic overlap of auditory and visual fields. All of this data aside, we tried Gemini over the summer. In 6 weeks, she began reading for the first time in her life at 13 years old. She went up 4 grade levels in 6 weeks. This is a miracle. I have to say, kind of is. We also know that people with autism have an overdeveloped default network. Now, the default network is what we use for dreaming or daydreaming. It's kind of like a parallel universe inside your mind. And you know when you're in it, when you're lost in thought and you have a far-off look on your face, you're not present in the moment, you don't really pay attention to what's going on. Sounds very familiar, right? Our kids with autism spend a lot of time in their default network. Your children will come up to you and say, hello, and you can hear something kind of talking, but you're not really paying attention to what it is until they say, Earth to Mom, and then you wake up and you can acknowledge them because you've just switched into your active network. We believe that Gemini is climbing inside the default network and teaching children where they live. The other time you use your default network is when you're engrossed in a movie. You have the same thing that happened. The problem with all other videos besides Gemini is that it encourages the children or adults with autism to retreat more and more into their own world. The Gemini filming method, the DVM filming method, embeds visual and auditory anomalies into the editing process. So it constantly brings you over into your active network. It doesn't allow you to zone out. That's why 20 to 30% of kids don't really like Gemini, because they use video as a way to transform themselves deeper and deeper into their default. And it's almost like someone's tapping him on the shoulder all the time saying, wake up, and it's annoying. But by doing that, we believe we are instructing in the default network, bringing the information over to the active network where they can use it. You are the same person you are right now with the same brain and the same intelligence when you're dreaming. Except the information is just kind of crazy. And even if you learn something fabulous when you're dreaming, when you wake up, you forget it. That may be why people with autism can learn skills in a therapy setting, and then they come back the next day and it's like they never learned them. They forgot. They learned it while they were dreaming. So we're showing now that we can actually teach people in the state, bring it over to the default network, and they hold on to the gains and they increase. And again, we have an example of this in that Princeton study. Here are 3 of the adults from the study. As you can see, this right here is the pre-test before they were given intervention. The middle student gained 100% mastery only by testing him, which is common. He was been taught these targets his whole life. He's an adult now. And just by the testing reminding him, he was able to remember and actually show mastery. The problem is 3 months later, when you go back and test him, he's going to be down to 0 again. After intervention, Gemini was able to produce 100% mastery in all 3 subjects. But the most important thing is 3 months later, after the intervention stopped, they maintained their 100% mastery. So we got the information into the active network where it can be retained. The other thing about Gemini is it just simply creates time. Over 70% of a therapy hour is spent on modeling, usually with flashcards. Then there's some maintenance and data collection. Only about 15% of the time is spent on generalization, which is that bringing the child from the the default network into the active network, which is the most important part of live therapy. With Gemini, all of that other time can be offloaded to the computer and done outside of therapy. So in the car, during meals, even parents use it during bath time, which increases the generalization piece up to 85% of the therapy hour, which makes it like 4 times as much therapy. Even though we were in research for almost 16 years, we just launched to the public a year ago. In that time, we are in over 30 countries in 4 different languages. This is a slide of the last 500 people to log into their Gemini account. There is a crisis in therapy of global proportions. In the United States alone, if we had all the therapists that we need to serve our population, we would need about 5 million of them. We have less than 200,000. And that's in the United States. We have better access to services than any place on the planet. In many places in the world, we are struggling simply to acknowledge the very existence of people with autism and special needs. In Africa, there is a program called Let Them See the Sun, because many people with autism are never allowed to leave the house. They're even chained to tables for hours and hours at a time. That may sound terrible, but old attitudes of shame and fear that the child is going to get hurt prevent people from even seeking help. With Gemini, we're able to bring effective therapy inside the privacy and security of the home. And by teaching the children language, we are also delivering videos that teach the family acceptance and shatter their old preconceived ideas of prejudice. In Mexico, we met with we had discussions last week in the city of Mexico City, and we are looking at rolling out Gemini on a large scale to the entire country, and they can be a model for Latin America and the world. Even if you don't have electricity, if you don't have internet, with a tablet, you can bring Gemini into the home and have effective therapy, and you only have to log back into the internet once every 2 weeks. We are working with agencies in Jordan who are going into the Syrian refugee camps and diagnosing children there. We believe that's between 4,000 and 8,000 children with autism in the refugee camps. But if you have a diagnosis, it's not really going to get you anywhere because there's no therapy available. But with Gemini and a large screen TV in a tent, you can deliver therapy to groups of children. Now, having a child who needs constant care and has minimal or no language can be absolutely devastating for a family in the Middle East. The difference, or in the second or third world in general, the difference between having no language and needing constant care and having a functional vocabulary and being independent is night and day. People with exceptionalities with Gemini can not only learn language, but we can teach them vocational skills that transform them from a significant burden on their family, financially, and society, to an asset with vocational skills. Gemini is delivering effective, scalable, and economically feasible therapy to one of the most pressing needs of our time. Thank you very much.